Okay, we're recording. It should have come on and said record to the cloud. Whoops. But we're started. Go ahead. You can go ahead. It's recording.
Good morning, Rotarians and guests, if we have any. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson. I'm Ron Strobel, the Sergeant at Arms. Our invocation this morning is by Patricia Getz.
This is a prayer from a Frenchman from the 1960s, and it's from his book called Prayers. The bricklayer laid a brick on a bed of cement. Then, with a precise stroke of his trowel, spread another layer, and without a by your leave, laid on another brick. The foundations grew visibly. The building rose tall and strong to shelter men. I thought, Lord, of that poor brick buried in the darkness at the base of the big building. No one sees it, but it accomplishes its task, and the other bricks need it. Lord, what difference whether I'm at the rooftop or in the foundation of your building, as long as I stand faithfully at the right place.
Thank you, Patricia. And lead us in the pledge and four-way test, Jim Lane.
Thanks, Ron. Good morning, Rotarians. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now for the four-way test of things we say, think, say, and do. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thanks, Jim. And I'm going to introduce what is not a guest anymore. Jenny Fraser next week will be inducted. So she's sitting here as a member of the group. Our president, Pat Shearer.
Thank you very much, Ron. Well, we're starting the day with a dad joke, apparently.
But Pat, I was asked to put that up in your honor.
Well, at least there'll be something that the club will remember me by as my term as president. So our quote to start the day today: great theater is about challenging how we think and encouraging us to fantasize about a world we aspire to. William Defoe. Our service project for April continues to be the women's shelter in Portage County. So we're still looking for those basic items for the women's shelter. And we'll still be collecting those throughout the entire month. There's a club board meeting today, immediately following our regular club board meeting. Any Rotarian interested in serving as a trustee on the club board for next year, we normally have two people that rotate off the board. So if anybody's interested potentially serving on the board, please see Ron Strobel or myself. Our club's annual election will take place on May 4th. So it's not a big formality of anything, but we'll be doing our election on May 4th as part of our regular business meeting. Jim Mahern, would you like to come up and talk about the four-way speech contest?
James, did you happen to put the picture? Where'd he go? James Field? Oh, okay. You got it. Good news. Thank you. Good news. At the district competition, there were 25 competitors from 25 clubs, and got third. And it was close. So yeah, give her a hand. Interesting was her mother and grandmother thought they make her nervous because you have to sit pretty close to the speaker in the preliminary rounds. So it was just she and I sitting and they called her name, and she went up and did her thing. They have 5 finalists that come up and give their talk, and out of that come 1 through 5. And then I had to go out for a little bit, and I came back in, and there's 2 women there. It's her mother and her grandmother. And they went back hiding way in the back of this big auditorium at Kent Roosevelt because they didn't want her to get any more nervous when she was there. But she was awesome. She did a great job, and all the speakers did a great job. I had her at 3rd, and she did come in 3rd. If you want to see who won, see an awesome. They're going to put it online in the district website here pretty soon. So I looked at my records, and the best recollection I have, what I have is 7 out of the last 10 years, we've had someone in the top 5 from the city of Hudson. So that's pretty darn good. And I was talking to Will Underwood, who's been running it for a few years. And we guessed that in the last about 15 years, we have had, in the last 25 years, we've had close to 20,000 students just in the district who have competed and took part in the speech contest. So it was a real winner.
Jim, thank you for all your leadership in that committee and all the Rotarians that spent time at the high school judging or were here judging when we had the final contest here at the club meeting. It's a great service that we do to the community and also getting potentially future Rotarians engaged at an early age. So some other good news, Dan Williams is at home and is on the mend. He'll be doing all of his therapy and that kind of stuff from home. So that's a good sign. So if you have an opportunity to drop Dan a note or an email, or he is at home. So that's a positive. The district conference is coming up very quickly. It's not this weekend, but it's the following weekend, and it's in Cuyahoga Falls at the Sheraton. So if you're interested in potentially going to the district conference or just dropping in for 1 or 2 of the sessions, if you go to District 6630, the website, the registration there is right on the website, and you can pick and choose different things that you like to go to. The conference starts on Thursday night and goes until Sunday. So there's opportunities throughout the day on Friday, as well as Saturday and Sunday to be able to go to items. So I highly encourage everybody to participate in that. Marilyn, would you introduce our speaker?
You know, once I get the microphone, I will be talking about the gala too. It is time to buy your tickets, invite your friends. I have extra copies of invitations out in the gathering room. So pick up a few and help us fill some tables. This year, the tables will seat 8. Because of COVID, still kind of lingering around, we have filed a safety plan at the recommendation of Akron Children's. And so the seating is 8 at a table. We will have masks available at the evening of. And so if that is a concern for you, you're certainly free to wear a mask that evening. I would encourage any members who have businesses and are so inclined to please purchase a table. That brings significant other opportunities for marketing for your company. You are listed in our program. You are listed in our after event thank yous in that very large prominent ad that we put in the Hudson Hub. So there are benefits to having a table. I'd like to let you know that Akron Children's sponsorship, the check has arrived and we're looking good there. We also have one gift that I think is going to be a knockout added to our live auction. We have an overnight stay at the Breakers at Cedar Point for a family of 4. And in addition, there are 4 tickets to the water park there, as well as 4 general tickets to Cedar Point itself. So that's a great getaway for a family with teenagers. Thank you, Pat Getz. Now to our speaker. Eric Van Baars serves as the school director as well as the executive producer for Porthouse Theatre since 2014. We are so fortunate to have a facility such as Porthouse in our community. Kent State is well known as a training spot for future talent. As the associate professor in the Department of Theater and Dance, he's also taught movement, musical theater, and acting. And for the School of Theater and Dance, he has directed the New York Musical Theater Showcase and over 15 other productions. If you were attending the Music from the Western Reserve last Sunday afternoon, you would have seen that New York Theater Showcase. I'm telling you, there is such talent here, such enthusiasm, and honestly, these kids are limber. As a director and choreographer, Eric's work has been seen at the MAC Theater of Busan, Korea, the St. Louis Repertory Theater, Connecticut Repertory Theater, the Berea Summer Theater, the Halley Theater, Weather Vane Playhouse, and Keene Park. His performance credits include the Walnut Street Theater, GEVA Theater Virginia, Radio City Music Hall, the St. Louis Repertory Theater, and the Great Lakes Theater Festival, the Cherry County Playhouse, and Cincinnati Playhouse, as well as national and international tours. In 2010, he was commissioned as the Roe Green visiting guest artist for the University of Colorado at Boulder. In 2014, Eric served as a guest faculty for Dongseo University in Busan, South Korea, where he directed the Korean premiere of Children of Eden. He's a member of Actors Equity Association and the Society of Directors and Choreographers. And he is a local guy. He graduated in 2002 with a master's in fine art, graduate of Kent State, and received his BFA from East Carolina University in 1981. Eric, it's good to see you again. Let's take this show away.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. And thank you to the Hudson Rotary Club for inviting me in this morning. I just want to make sure I can be heard in the room. Someone gives you a thumbs up that everything's good. Or a verbal yes, we're good. We're good. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Thanks so much. I always like to do a Zoom check-in, and it's great to take this opportunity to speak with you all this morning. At first I wondered when Marilyn asked, what could I contribute to the Rotary Club of Hudson? And I went to the Rotary. I'm not a Rotarian, but I went to the Rotary bylaws and looked at the mission of the Rotary of being a humanitarian service organization and bringing together business and professional leadership to promote integrity, advance goodwill, peace, and understanding in the world. And I can't think of a better group for me to share with this morning a deeper dive of understanding in our world, in my world, the world I love, and as you've heard, the world I've been a part of all my life, the performing arts, and how these last 2 years, the effect of the pandemic on our world and the world of the performing arts, and the challenges that brings to the performing artist, namely for me as an educator, to our students who are entering industries, disciplines, and fields in the performing arts, how we can help them. But to share this information with you all as advocates and voices to go forward and provide a deeper context of why this is so important, not only to artists, but to communities that arts serve. So this is no surprise to anyone that the pandemic has so greatly changed our world, and there have been huge changes in the performing arts. There have been many things lost, but there have been things gained, new things as well. And so we have to look at those changes coming forward, going forward as we reemerge into, I don't say back to normal, but forward to normal in our world. The good news is we are open again. Most performing arts venues have been able to reopen. Admittedly, there are changes happening daily and new measures and protocols develop, but artists are creatives and creative types and have always found a workaround. And some of the developments that have come out of necessity will continue to have impact on the arts for a long time. I think it was, I'm not sure who said this. I was going to go back to, it was quoted all the way back to Ben Franklin, but I think most recently, someone in the 1960s said that theater has been going out of business for over 200 years, where we've been told that it's a dying art form, and it was replaced first by radio, by film, by the internet, by Zoom now. And so that sense of the business is going out of business has been long layered in the culture of the arts and humanities. And so consequently, it has always fostered a creative drive in the artist and in the arts organizations to circumvent that. But I will be honest that the impact the pandemic caused on our economies has caused severe performing arts closures, layoffs, and furloughs in the last 2 years. And while other organizations and entertainment organizations such as the restaurants, the hospitality field, Baars, were helped or buttressed, I guess, scaffolded by COVID CARES funding from the government, the entertainment field did not receive as much support because in reality, we're not considered essential. Entertainment is not considered essential in our world. And so when the government provided coronavirus relief, about $15 million came to the Save Our Stages program, but that went mostly to larger organizations and companies. And when you think about around the need for every industry around the country, I don't have to tell you what a small amount $15 million is when you look at that on a national scale. I will also add and remind everyone, and this is part of my job as an artist and an arts advocate, because I will step back and say, everyone, including myself, goes to a performance or goes to a show, and we want to be wowed and impressed by the talent, but we don't want to see how hard people work, right? We don't want to go to the show and go, boy, they're really working hard, and all the work went into that. We, as a theater director, I don't want you to spend your attention looking at how hard everything is, or how much everything costs, or how long it took to make it. We would just want you to enjoy the show. And so that's our focus. And because that focus is has such a drive, many people don't really understand what goes into a theatrical production or running a theatrical organization. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes work that happens that has been greatly changed because of mitigation strategies and just because of strategies in general of just trying to carry on. I will also say, stepping back to government money going in to help organizations and companies, that many workers in the performing arts are independent contractors. And so while funding went towards companies to help buttress and scaffold companies, so many artists that are not connected with full-time employment in the gig economy world that many of our young people live in and have been in for 20 years have been deeply challenged. So this, I will also step back and say something that I don't think would be a surprise to anyone in the room today, that working in the arts is an incredibly unpredictable way to make a living. I'm a member of Actors Equity, the national union, for actors and stage managers. And in that union, we identify full-time employment as having worked 15 weeks a year. And so when you think that within our own union, our own livelihood, we associate a full-time job with 15 weeks of work, it kind of sets a parameter of how important that work is and how sporadic that work can be. As you probably all know, that Broadway, the epicenter of the performing arts, the epicenter of the commercial theater world in the United States, was completely shut down for almost 2 years. Things didn't really start to reopen until fall of 21. And then we had 2 more waves of different infections and were challenged with that. So the coronavirus continues to have a devastating impact on America's art sectors. And since the first case was reported in January of 2020, cancellations have taken place at virtually every arts organization in the country, and artists and creative workers are among the most severely affected segments of our nation's workforce. And so what I'm sharing with you is, yes, we're coming out of this storm, but it is a very long storm, and it has had great effect on the performing arts of how companies are able to navigate going forward. And there's also a lot of this information I share is available to everyone through research through the organization Americans for the Arts, and where they really advocate for the impact and the necessity for support on both the human and financial impact that the crisis has caused. As of last year, and this is going back a little bit, this is as of the fall, over $170 billion in sales were lost through performing arts and creative industries. And you think for the arts, there's really a big season, and so you can look at this. Playhouse Square just announced their season next year. The fall, November, late October, November, December, we go into the holidays. That's where everyone goes to see the Nutcracker or a Christmas Carol or a Christmas Story. So those holiday seasons for most arts organizations have huge revenue drivers and some of our biggest revenue fields. And so to have lost a couple of those holiday seasons, just as the retail world did, that was devastating. And about $5 billion in revenue had been lost each holiday season nationwide. And consequently, about 50% of the workforce dropped out, because when there is no work and it looks like there won't be work for a while, people have career changes. And so not only are we dealing with a loss of revenue and a loss of audience, but a loss of workforce, which isn't surprising, I wouldn't think, to anyone in this room, because that loss of workforce is challenging many industries in our world. So as the arts, another big aspect of the arts is, and you're in Hudson, I'm here in my office in Kent. It is nationwide, but arts are also clustered in magnet areas and metro areas in the country. And so when those metro areas close down, or when the arts close down in them, and I'll go to Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. I'll step back. I'm going to stay out of the film industry because that had its own challenges, and actually, because of the money put in the film industry, managed to weather it much better than live performance. But in New York, with 50% of the workforce reevaluating, hey, can I do this? Will I have a job in 2 years? There was a great migration from these metropolitan areas where industry people such as casting directors, musicians, designers who had made that city their home, all moved home. I know many people who moved out of New York because they said it's just too expensive to stay here. There's no work. I'm going to go back to Ohio, back to Michigan, back to North Carolina, where I'm from. And that migration and cancellation had caused great impact on not only the communities that those artists were leaving, but the communities they went back to. So much so that for the first time in, I think, modern history, in the last 40, 50 years, real estate values in New York City actually went down over the pandemic. For the first time, there was a glut of available apartments in New York because so many people were moving out of these larger areas. So there was also, I'm talking about the commercial theater world, but I'm working higher ed and nonprofit arts, Porthouse Theatre. I hope everyone is, when I say Porthouse Theatre, there's some head shaking or nods or smiling, and that many of you members have been to Porthouse. If you haven't, I invite you to come out. It is our summer theater associated with the university. It is our summer training program for our students, and a chance for our students to work with guest directors and designers and make professional connections. And so as part of the nonprofit arts sector and cultural sectors, the financial losses to nonprofit organizations are estimated to be close to $20 or $30 billion. And that is funding that would normally come in through generosity of grants and corporate donating. And most of those nonprofit sectors get the bulk of their funding through individual donations. So 99% of all cultural art organizations and presenting organizations canceled events during the pandemic. A loss of close to $6 million of admissions, close to $17 billion in audience spending. Because when you think about it, and you've probably done this yourself, when you go to Cleveland to see a show, or go to New York to see a show, or go anywhere to see a show, there's probably dinner attached to that. You may be spending time in a hotel, traveling, there's parking, there's retail. So there's so many other economies associated around the arts that were impacted and had loss because of the arts. Same thing with sports. All the bars shut down when there's not a ball game. Well, restaurants have a great impact when there's not a play. So the total economic impact on organizational and audience spending has been close to $7 billion. And in lost government revenue alone, and over almost 1 million jobs that are no longer being supported. So when you look at those tough numbers and the tough barriers of not only people leaving because there are no jobs, but organizations, and particularly nonprofit organizations, having to lay off or furlough their staff because they just don't have work for them. So the good news is, or the reality is, that we learn to figure out a way to make it work. And so over almost 70% of all of these nonprofit organizations found a way to make their cultural products available through, just as we're meeting right now, through online or through social media. And these online experiences, as we're having right now, continue to happen and continue to connect audiences with organizations, and continue to have to allow those organizations to provide content. We I'll step back. We here at the School of Theater and Dance did a virtual season 2 years ago when we closed down our fall 21, spring 20, no, that's this year, our fall 20, spring 21 school season. We typically do 8 plays, musicals, and dance concerts. We did remote concerts. Our students had to have those experiences. That's why they were here. That's what they were training to do. And so we, along with many other universities, found different ways to do them. My colleagues in southern state universities, or places where the weather's a little more predictable, many people did outdoor performances. Some people did remote live, what we're doing right now, record a Zoom live performance. We did a combination. We did one play that was Zoom live, so they could see it live in real time. And then the rest of our season was recorded. So we were able to record them more like a film and release them. And we did not charge admission for our school performances, because we, quite frankly, didn't know who was going to come, and wanted to make it as open and as accessible as possible, so that anyone that could see it would not have a financial barrier. So there are many ways that arts organizations continue to make things happen during the pandemic, and slowly, as of last summer, and as we continue unfolding, about half of those arts organizations have reopened to close to full capacity, but about half of them are closed right now, and the jury is still out to see whether they will continue, whether those organizations will reopen. The top barriers, no surprise to anyone, of why it's hard to reopen, or why arts organizations are considering reopening, is, will customers come back? Are customers likely to attend? Are patrons likely to attend? One big barrier at Porthouse, last summer, we had a limited season. We always do 3 musicals. We did 3 musicals last summer, but they were smaller scale. Our budgets were deeply slashed, because we did not know if we would have an audience to come back in. And so we downsized in order to mitigate any financial risk, but still provide quality entertainment and experiences for our students that had missed out on those experiences during the academic year. The other big barrier is government restrictions and guidelines. As I said, I'm a member of Actors Equity Association, the union of actors and stage managers, and that union has had very strict guidelines above and beyond the government regulations of reopening, testing, making sure that the HVAC and the ventilation systems are up to the standards of the union. There have been very strict guidelines that the performing arts have had to take on. And most of our buildings, and if you've been to Playhouse Square, or if you've been to Broadway and a Broadway theater, these buildings are often 100 years old or more. Most of them were built in the 1920s and 30s. There's a lot of infrastructure needed to make these older buildings compliant with contemporary restrictions and guidelines and safety codes. And then so these things have just made it really impractical to produce art in the current environment. Still, we do it. It was, I guess I will admit, art has never really been a practical thing to do, but we're all guided to do it because of its impact and the need for narratives within our story. I will say that the impact on creative workers have been among the most severely affected workers through the pandemic. 70% became fully unemployed and lost an average of $30,000 each in creative-based income. And those were figures based on a survey dashboard last February, so a couple months ago, through Americans from the Arts. But 95% reported a loss of income, 79% experienced a decrease in work that generated income, 67% are unable to access the supplies, the resources, or the people necessary to create their work. You will imagine, just as any industry, the arts is suffering greatly from supply loss and shipping problems right now, and the cost of materials. Most of our sets here at the school and in all theaters are built with we're either using lumber or we're using steel, and the cost of both of those things have skyrocketed in the last couple of months. So we are looking at supply chain issues. We are looking at unregulated inflation, and the cost of those raw materials that we use have greatly gone up, so much so that we're always repurposing and using what we have, but being really frugal on our builds, and that affects the bottom line of our production quality as well. Unemployment was higher for specific artists than anywhere else across the country. And so I'll say, again, factoring in that employment rates for actors is considered 15 weeks out of the year. So if you're working 15 weeks, you're considered fully employed. Bear that in mind, that unemployment rates for specific artists, actors were 52%, dancers 55%, musicians 27%. And again, this is against the national labor statistic averages of unemployment of around 8 or 9% during the height of the pandemic. So just to reinforce the severity of what COVID-19 and the continuing variances have taken on the arts. And then, of course, it goes without saying that Black, Indigenous artists of color, people of color, have had a higher rate of unemployment than white artists during the pandemic and are losing a larger percentage of their creative income. And many of these artists we're looking at artists who have direct contact and impact lower income and underrepresented communities. And so by virtue of those artists not having work in those communities are even more underserved than some of the more affluent neighborhood communities. So the top 3 needs for artists: unemployment insurance, can't have a great amount of just having employment insurance, food, housing assistance, and forgivable business loans, where a lot of people took out business loans to keep it going. Social distancing, of course, has had a great impact. And so I could, these are the hard truth. And but I just wanted to reinforce this message with members of an organization that really looks into the value of the community and what happens within a community, and advance the goodwill and understanding in the world that it is still incredibly hard right now for arts organizations to produce quality content. I'll skip a little to my world specifically, and my role here is the director of the School of Theater and Dance, and most universities, that the impact on training that the pandemic COVID has caused has just been has turned our world upside down. As anyone in education it would. We've all learned how to teach on Zoom. We've all learned how to teach in hybrid classrooms, but you can well imagine that learning to dance on Zoom is not an easy thing, and is something that students really didn't sign up for. In the performing arts, most of our performance classes here at the university, we've found a way to keep those classes happening live in very different dimensions of increasing social distancing. The research showed at the beginning of the pandemic and continues that playing wind instruments and singing are two of the highest risk activities that a human being could take on because of the thin mucus condensation in the air. I'm not using the correct word, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Just there's the virtual spray of contamination and contagion was much higher in those activities. And so our students learn to sing not only virtually on a screen, which we all did, but to sing behind a full medical face mask and a face shield, 20 feet away from everyone else in the room, and the logistics of how can you hear the piano in this face bubble. Just real great challenges. Just interesting, I was talking to someone the other day about musicians and horn players, saxophone, clarinet players, trumpet players. A lot more became infected than non-wind instruments. And so just that spreading, people in a jazz band, you can just think about that spread and the concern about that spread. And so we've learned to work a way around that. I already spoke about the Great Migration has pulled theater practitioners away from businesses. There's been a training hiatus. So our students, because our students have not had the skills the last couple of years to build up their resume and their skill set. And so when you think about students and they've done wonderful things, and they've learned how to create, and they have learned how to do virtual content. Everyone's learned how to be a film editor. Everyone has learned how to do a self-tape audition and make it look professional, because that's what the industry is demanding right now. But there has been a training hiatus. So our students, and particularly our seniors right now, who have had a 2-year suspension on their training, feel less qualified to enter a labor market. And many have left that market, as I've said. So with the rising material costs and supply chain issues, theater is facing a material as well as a labor shortage, because university training programs are not putting out the quantity of students that we had, and the students that are graduating from these programs don't feel like they have the quality to be competitive in a professional market. I'll share this anecdotally. A friend told me last week, the musical Hamilton. We've all heard of Hamilton. It's coming back to Playhouse Square this season. That production has never had to advertise for workers. There was a long list of people who wanted to be involved in Hamilton, so much there's a wait list. They've started advertising for sound engineers. And that means that they don't have the resources on file to have qualified sound engineers to move into their program. And so that was a big trigger to me of how bad it still is, because many of these big Broadway programs will have backup files, and if someone goes down, they call someone and they go right in and the show goes on. Well, that labor market has greatly downsized and diminished. And so now they're looking at taking applications and taking the time to train workers for those jobs, where 3 and 4 years ago, there were a dozen people ready and waiting to go into them. So it has put a pressure on university training programs to recruit high school students. And there again, that's trickled down. We have high school students who have come out of this as well, who haven't had that experience in their high school. So they feel less qualified going into college. All to say, educators are looking at a 6-year span. Right now, we're all talking of it's going to really take about a 6-year cycle for our students to develop the skills and get back to where they feel that they can be competitive going into a labor market in a field. And many of us, when you think about the performing arts, we think about the person on stage, the actor, the singer, the dancer, but we're also talking about all of our technicians and the costume shops, sound engineers, light board operators, electricians, carpenters, designers, drapers. So all the myriad of jobs that happen behind the scenes that this industry supports. And we as an educational organization support to train these students to do. We're looking at truly a 5 to 6 year process before we're back up to what we were before pre-pandemic or those numbers. The vaccine, and it's not just here. It's not, of course, it's not just in Northeast Ohio or Kent State or even in the United States. It's caused quite a bit of interruption for performing arts organizations that bring in international components. The Kennedy Center is one that comes to mind, where arts, along with all arts presenters worldwide, have had to cancel any offerings of anything that travels or ships things overseas because of supply chain issues. And so I know the Kennedy Center, they lost several bookings with international dance companies and international orchestras because you couldn't get out of countries. You have to, particularly if someone comes from China, they would need to wait 2 weeks quarantine on either end. And we just don't have the resources for that. So our union, as I said, our union Actors Equity worked on very different scenarios and guidance issues. Right now, they have just opened up a new set of guidelines that we're working under that will be effective until August 3rd. These seem much more manageable than they did last year. And so we look forward to working at Porthouse with the equity contracts and under equity regulations once again this summer of 22. There were 4 different main categories of compliance, production compliance that the union had created during the pandemic. And we were in the most beneficial one. We were an outdoor venue, considered an outdoor theater. Porthouse is covered, but we are outdoors. And we had an audience. So outdoor with an audience, outdoor without an audience, indoor with an audience, indoor without an audience meaning virtual live without an audience in the venue were the 4 channels that the union set up for guidelines for us to work under. But I will say we looked into streaming productions too, and there's another huge change. Here's a huge shift in the industry because before January 2020, streaming was regarded as an extracurricular activity, or maybe we'll stream something for additional revenue stream to make it available. But very few theatrical productions were streamed because of the costs associated with setting that up. Now everyone is streaming and getting rights to these streaming productions, because most of these are under warranty and licensing. We have to apply for the license for everything we do. Most of these license companies were not set up, had not cleared it with the creators of these shows to allow for streaming. So there was a huge scramble of what titles are available, what can we stream, how can we stream it, what platforms must we use. Different royalty companies had developed quick contracts with different streaming platforms. And so you had to use this platform for this show and this platform for that show. And it really became confusing, and it continues to be confusing, but some very quick regulations were put in place regarding streaming, and we're continuing to work our way through that to provide professional companies look at continuing offering maybe a streaming version of a production. I will say that when we get the rights to do a production, that doesn't guarantee we also have the streaming rights. That's another contract negotiation that goes into play. And so those things are, we go into them mindfully with the financial impact associated with streaming, because it's not, it doesn't come without cost. So the last thing I'll talk about, and that is burnout. There have been burnout from audience members, also the unwillingness to participate. And so some of the concessions that have come out of all of these mitigation values we've made is looking at producing shorter plays, doing plays without intermission, because if people get up and move around and then come back in, that was another concern of mitigation. And so you'll see as you go to the theater, a lot of plays are shorter. If you're doing anything on Zoom, to do a 3-hour Zoom play, you just lose their interest. I'm going to wrap this up soon because I know I'm talking a long time, but I just want to drive this home that both the in-person and the streaming productions, we're now looking at doing a shorter production, because that seems to be the preference and has the least amount of concerns for mitigation. But what has blossomed? I will tell you that here are the things that have come out. I'm a Pollyanna, and so I'm going to polish some prisms with rainbows right now. And look, you have to have hope. So what has blossomed out of this for the arts? The advent and the opportunity for online workshops. Almost every theater that has an educational mission or educational proponent to it opened up virtual learning centers, online workshops, online discussions, the availability to visit virtual classrooms, study groups. These have all been things that people could do from their home, because they just became available as this meeting did this morning through technology and Zoom. And so some of the benefits that our patrons have seen from that is accessibility, no parking, no travel cost. Groups can attend from different regions. You can meet up with people from different regions. Online fundraising has been a big aspect of this. The availability to do fundraising online and to generate capital that way. And capital and structural improvements. I will say that theaters are rarely empty. It's hard. We're hard pressed to find a time in our theater spaces where they're empty and we could do some renovation. But organizations which had the funds to do so use the time in the last 2 years to make upgrades and improvements. And as I said, while some benefits benefited from CARES Act funding to make payroll, many started their capital campaigns earlier, just given the known downtime, and they could get things done in the time that they knew they were going to be not having production to be dark. So the big question we ask, and we asked that last summer and continue to ask this, is will audiences return? In general, sales have been down. But this is a good time. Presenters and officials say this is the best time for an audience person to get tickets to Broadway shows because they're more available right now. According to the Broadway League, which is the league of producers that monitor all of our commercial theaters in New York, the Broadway industry, 80% of seats for most of the Broadway shows have been filled this past spring, February and March. And so this is down from pre-pandemic years when sales would have been a little higher, but it does show that people are coming back and that slow return is happening. But theater draws an older crowd. Our audiences tend to skew in an older demographic. And so we're wrestling with, are people asking themselves, do I really need to go see theater again? If I've had 2 years of it. I've spent the last 2 years without going. Do I really need this in my life? And so people have adapted different lifestyles. They're working from home. They're no longer in their offices. So consequently, they're no longer going to restaurants for lunch downtown. And so all these lifestyle changes that the pandemic has afforded the whole community is having its effect and impact on all industries, and the arts are no exception. So that's a lot of information I've given you, but I just want to conclude with a little story that happened to me. I was in New York 2 weeks ago. As Marilyn said, our musical theater senior students who presented last Sunday did their agent presentation in New York. We send our seniors to New York, and they do a show for industry people, for agents and managers, and trying to get into the business. And I will say our students did phenomenal this year. They got great representation. They got great response. And so that was wonderful for us as artists to know that, as educators, to know that we are helping young people to bring their very best selves into the industry as they get back into it. But I was in a cab in New York, and this kind of talking about theater, and the cab driver was I said, how are things going here? You drive around Times Square, you take people to theaters, to shows. Is business picking up again? Is this really true? Because we're hearing it's picking up, but I'm not from New York. And he had, as he said, I'm Greek, I'm Greek, and he had this little laminated photograph of the Acropolis, up front in the cab with him. And he said, let me tell you, your profession, you're in the theater, your profession has been around for 1,000 years. It's not going to go away. The theater's not going to go away. So it was really heartfelt to hear someone say that, yes, there's always been struggles, but the need for the arts and the need for the impact of the arts on our communities is greater now than ever. So that's my morning story, and I'm sharing with you, and I'm happy to take questions or engage in conversation if time allows. Thank you very much.
Eric, we have about a minute, but are there any productions at Porthouse or at Kent that you want to mention that people may want to visit?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm always up for a shameless plug. Thanks for throwing that in. We are opening our production of Much Ado About Nothing here at the university on Friday the 22nd. It runs through May 1st. We're benefiting from having a guest director series. And this year, our guest director, Jamaica Holloway, has written her own adaptation of Shakespeare's classic. It's really fun. The students are having a great time. So if you're not a Shakespeare fan, you will greatly enjoy this production. If you are a Shakespeare fan, you will still enjoy this production. And then this summer at Porthouse, we have a great season. We're opening on June 16th with 3 great musicals: Little Shop of Horrors, Godspell, and the classic West Side Story. So we would love to see everyone out at Porthouse. And again, last summer we were kind of balancing some issues of supply chain, and this summer we are back up and running with 3 fully developed productions, and so we can't wait to share those with our audiences and friends.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Eric. We appreciate you sharing us everything that's going on in the theater business, as well as what's going on at Kent State and at the theater. Appreciate you being with us this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. So we finish on time. We have our Rotabuck raffle. That's $9. And the winning ticket, I'm going to go down to the bottom of the basket. So maybe one of you early birds is going to have a chance to win. 717443. 717443. Chris, all right. All right, it's a huge payout, $9. And there's still a black marble in there, Chris. Oh, no black marble. All right. Women's shelter in Portage County. Terry can take that from you. So Chris has reminded we have the maker space at the high school is going to be making all of our name badges. So if any of you have lost, misplaced, took home, can't find your name badges, if you would like a new one, we're putting in an order for those this upcoming week. So see Chris before you leave today so that we can get a new badge ordered for you. And for our Rotary tradition, the outgoing dad joke. A local theater was just robbed of $286 the other day. The thief stole one large drink, a large popcorn, and a candy bar.